We met at a time when nothing in our lives was settled. The future was a blurry idea we talked about but never truly understood. I was standing at the edge of becoming someone, unsure of who that person would be. You were doing the same, pretending you had answers when you were just as lost. The world around us felt loud, full of expectations, pressure, unfinished dreams, and somehow, in the middle of that noise, we found each other. It wasn't dramatic at first. No fireworks. No cinematic moment. Just a simple meeting that felt strangely familiar, like we had crossed paths before in another life and forgotten the details. You smiled, and it wasn't the kind meant to impress, it was honest, unguarded. I remember thinking how rare that was. People our age were already learning how to hide. You hadn't yet. We talked for hours that first day, about everything and nothing at all. Dreams we hadn't chased. Fears we didn't admit out loud. Music that made us feel understood. I didn't realize it then, but that conversation planted something deep inside me, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. You listened like my words mattered, like my unfinished thoughts were worth holding onto. That alone felt like love. Soon, seeing you became the best part of my days. Life was still messy, money problems, family expectations, unanswered questions about the future, but when I was with you, those worries softened. You had a way of making the present feel enough. We laughed about things that didn't matter and avoided talking about things that did. Ignorance felt like peace back then. I told myself it was destiny. That we met for a reason. When something feels that right, you don't question it, you surrender to it. I didn't ask whether the timing made sense. I didn't ask whether we were ready. I only knew that when you held my hand, everything felt possible. And possibility is intoxicating. We fell in love quickly, recklessly. Not the slow, careful kind that checks for warning signs, but the kind that dives headfirst and hopes for the best. Every late-night conversation felt like a promise. Every shared silence felt sacred. We spoke about the future in soft, hopeful tones, as if wanting it badly enough would make it real. We believed love alone could protect us from what was coming. But even then, there were signs we chose not to see. We were building something beautiful on unstable ground. I was still learning how to stand on my own, still fighting battles I hadn't won yet. You were torn between who you were and who the world wanted you to be. Love became our escape, not our foundation. Still, in those early days, none of that mattered. All that mattered was how alive we felt together. The way your eyes lit up when you talked about your dreams even though you didn't know how to reach them. The way you looked at me like I was stronger than I felt. We reflected the best versions of ourselves back to each other, and for a while, that was enough. I remember thinking that this was it. That this was the love people spend their lives searching for. I didn't understand then that timing isn't just about when you meet, it's about who you are when you do. We met too early, before life had shaped us, before pain had taught us lessons, before responsibility forced us to grow. But in that moment, none of that existed. There was only us. Two unfinished people believing we had found something finished, something permanent. We didn't know we were borrowing happiness from the future, that one day we would pay for it with heartbreak. Back then, love felt like fate. We didn't know it was also a warning. Love didn't arrive quietly anymore, it took over everything. Somewhere between late-night conversations and familiar silences, we stopped asking whether this love made sense and started believing it was enough. We didn't notice how fragile our lives still were, how little shelter we had built for something so powerful. Love became the center of our world, but the world itself remained unfinished. We wanted everything at once. Forever. Certainty. Belonging. But neither of us knew how to provide those things, not even to ourselves. I was still struggling to find stability, chasing goals without a clear direction, carrying doubts I pretended weren't there. You were caught between dreams and reality, pulled by responsibilities you weren't ready to accept. Instead of fixing what was broken around us, we hid inside each other. At first, that hiding felt beautiful. We shared moments that felt stolen from time, laughing in places we couldn't afford, making plans we weren't prepared to keep. Every promise felt sincere in the moment. "We'll figure it out," we said, as if love itself were a plan. As if affection could replace effort, and hope could replace preparation. We believed in potential more than reality. But love without stability is heavy. Slowly, it began to show. Small frustrations appeared where patience once lived. I grew anxious about the future, about money, about purpose. You grew restless, feeling trapped between staying and becoming someone else. We never fought about love, we fought about life. And life kept reminding us that love alone doesn't pay bills, heal old wounds, or answer hard questions. Still, we held on. I remember how tightly you clung to me when things got overwhelming, how your voice softened when you were scared. You needed reassurance. I needed strength. We gave each other what we could, even when it cost us parts of ourselves. I tried to be someone dependable before I had learned how. You tried to stay when everything inside you wanted to run. Neither of us was wrong, but neither of us was ready. We started making quiet sacrifices we never talked about. I postponed growth to keep the peace. You delayed your dreams to protect my feelings. Love slowly turned into compromise, and compromise turned into quiet resentment we didn't yet recognize. We smiled through uncertainty. We avoided conversations that felt too heavy. We told ourselves this was what love looked like, choosing each other, no matter the cost. But the cost was adding up. The world didn't slow down just because we were in love. Responsibilities grew louder. Expectations became heavier. And suddenly, love felt like something we had to defend instead of something that carried us. We were protecting each other from reality instead of facing it together. I began to notice how tired we were. Not physically, emotionally. The kind of tired that comes from pretending everything is okay when it isn't. The kind that shows up in forced smiles and delayed replies. We still loved deeply, but the joy felt thinner, stretched over too many worries. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if loving you meant losing myself. And I think you wondered the same. But we were afraid to say it out loud. Afraid that naming the problem would make it real. Afraid that honesty would lead us somewhere we weren't ready to go. So we stayed quiet. We clung to memories of how it began, how easy it once felt, how right it once seemed. We kept chasing that feeling, not realizing it belonged to a version of us that no longer existed. We were changing, growing unevenly, and love was struggling to keep up. Still, we told ourselves this was temporary. That once life settled, everything would be okay. That love would eventually be enough. But love needs shelter, stability, timing, readiness. And we had built none of that yet. We were two people deeply in love, standing in the rain, convincing ourselves the storm would pass if we just held on tighter. We didn't realize that love shouldn't feel like survival. Not yet. And that was the beginning of the cracks, quiet, invisible, but already shaping the ending we weren't brave enough to imagine. The first cracks weren't loud. They weren't arguments or fights that left marks on walls or bruises on hearts. They were quiet, subtle, and almost invisible, the kind that grows in the spaces between words, in the pauses that linger too long, in the glances that don't quite meet. Love was still there, but it had begun to strain under the weight of our lives. It started with little things. Missed calls. Forgotten promises. The way your smile sometimes felt distant, like you were carrying a burden you didn't want me to see. I noticed it, of course, but I told myself it was just a bad day. I didn't want to admit that the foundation we had built so passionately was starting to weaken. We stopped talking about the future the way we used to. Conversations became practical instead of hopeful. Bills, responsibilities, plans we didn't know how to keep. The dreams that had once felt infinite now seemed heavy, almost unreachable. I began to feel the tension in your voice when you spoke, the hesitation behind your laughter. I tried to reassure myself, telling myself love could carry us through anything. But love alone cannot fix timing, cannot slow life, cannot give answers when the world demands them. I noticed the quiet exhaustion in you. The way you avoided my eyes when things felt overwhelming. The way you nodded at my words without really hearing them. And I felt it in myself too, the fatigue of carrying both my fears and yours, the weight of being someone you needed before I had fully learned how to be me. We still loved each other, but love no longer came without compromise. Every gesture was measured, every word calculated. The unspoken tension stretched between us like an invisible rope, threatening to snap. We both pretended it wasn't there, clinging to the idea that if we ignored it long enough, it might disappear. But cracks don't disappear, they grow, slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day you wake up and realize the structure you trusted is no longer whole. Arguments began to surface, though never explosive. They were small, quiet battles over things that didn't matter on their own, but mattered because they reflected the stress we were carrying. A delayed message felt like neglect. A forgotten promise felt like betrayal. Every miscommunication became amplified, each silence a question we didn't know how to answer. I remember one night in particular. We sat together on the couch, the kind of silence that used to feel safe now heavy and suffocating. You stared out the window, and I wanted to reach for you, to remind you that we were in this together. But the words stuck in my throat. I could feel the distance between us stretching, not in kilometers or streets, but in moments where I didn't know if you were still mine, and you didn't know if I could still be yours. It wasn't anger that was growing, it was fear. Fear that we were changing, that we were no longer the people who had fallen so fiercely in love. Fear that our timing, already imperfect, was slipping further and further out of reach. Fear that one day we would look back and realize we had lost each other to life itself, not to a lack of love. We tried to hold on anyway. We still kissed with the same intensity, still whispered "I love you" when sleep overtook us. But even those moments, once electric and alive, were tinged with caution. A warning we couldn't yet name. The quiet cracks had begun, invisible to everyone else, yet all-consuming to us. We were two people who loved deeply, but who were slowly learning that love alone is not enough when life demands more than you can give. And the worst part was knowing it, feeling it in the small, almost imperceptible ways, and being powerless to stop it. We were falling, not in anger or betrayal, but in the slow, heartbreaking inevitability of timing gone wrong. It wasn't dramatic yet, but the foundation was trembling. And soon, the weight of what we had ignored would be too heavy to bear. The day we decided to let go wasn't marked by shouting or anger. It was quiet, almost painfully calm, a moment that should have been ordinary, but felt like the end of the world. We had loved each other with everything we had, yet somehow, everything we had still wasn't enough. Timing, life, circumstance, they had all conspired against us. I remember sitting across from you, our hands barely touching, both of us afraid to look fully at what was happening. The air between us was thick with things unsaid. We could feel it in our bones. The love we carried wasn't failing because it was weak, it was failing because it was the wrong time. "I don't think we can keep doing this," you whispered. Not a question, but a statement that carried all the weight of inevitability. My throat tightened, and I nodded, even though my heart screamed against the truth. I had known it for a while, but hearing it out loud made it real. We cried together, but it wasn't angry crying. It wasn't the kind that comes from betrayal or rage. It was soft, gentle, the kind that comes from loving someone so deeply that letting them go feels like losing a part of yourself. Every tear was a memory, every sniffle a reminder of moments that had once felt infinite. "I wish we had met later," I said. The words felt hollow even as they left my lips, because they carried a truth we couldn't escape. If only we had met when life was simpler, when our hearts were ready, maybe we could have built a love that lasted. But we hadn't. We were early, too raw, too unprepared for the weight of what we had. You nodded, your eyes brimming with unshed tears. Maybe in another life, you said softly, and I wanted to argue, to tell you we didn't need another life, we needed the one we had. But deep down, I knew you were right. Another life might give us the timing we had been denied in this one. The hardest part wasn't walking away, it was the knowing. The knowing that we loved each other more than anyone else ever could, yet love alone couldn't save us. We had tried, every day, every hour, every moment. But life demanded more than we could give. We had loved fiercely, but sometimes, fierce love isn't enough. We hugged one last time, a long, trembling embrace that seemed to stretch on forever. It was a promise and a goodbye at the same time. I pressed my face into your hair, memorizing the scent, the warmth, the feeling of being exactly where I was meant to be, if only for a moment. And then we let go. Slowly, reluctantly, like trying to release water from your hands and watching it slip away despite your best effort. We walked away not because we didn't care, but because we loved too much to let that love become something painful, something that could break us even more. I didn't know it at the time, but that moment would follow me forever. The memory of you, the sound of your laugh, the way your hand fit perfectly in mine, it became a shadow I carried, a reminder that timing can be cruel even to the strongest love. Some nights, I still imagine you across the room, smiling like you did in those early days, and I wonder if it would have been different if we had met at a better time. But I know, in my heart, that love without the right timing is a beautiful tragedy, a memory that can't be lived again, but never truly does. We didn't fail at love. We simply loved at the wrong time. And sometimes, loving someone at the wrong time is the most painful, most profound lesson life can give. Years have passed since that quiet goodbye, but the memory of you is still alive in the corners of my heart. I carry it not as a wound that refuses to heal, but as a tender ache, a reminder of a love that was perfect in intensity but flawed in timing. We didn't end in anger or regret, we ended because life asked more of us than we could give, and love alone could not answer. Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if we had met later, if we had been ready when we found each other. Would we have built a home together? Shared ordinary mornings and quiet nights? Laughed at our old mistakes without the weight of missed opportunities? I don't know. I only know that what we had, fleeting as it was, shaped me in ways I cannot unlearn. I have loved since, but differently. Safer, perhaps. More measured. And yet, in the quiet hours, I feel your presence. Not as a phantom or a regret, but as a reminder of what it feels like to be truly seen, to be loved without hesitation. You were the person who reflected my soul back to me, who held me at a time when I was still learning how to stand. That love, though it could not last, was a gift. I've learned that loving someone at the wrong time does not diminish the love itself. It doesn't make it weaker or less real. It simply means that life had other lessons to teach, and we were students too young to understand. Sometimes the heart must experience its own tragedies to grow, and ours was one that taught more than it ever destroyed. I think of you often, quietly. Sometimes I smile, remembering the way your hand felt in mine, the sound of your laughter in a room that felt like it was ours alone. Sometimes I feel a pang of longing, a wish that we could have had more. But those moments are soft now, tinged with gratitude instead of pain. We loved each other fiercely, deeply, and completely. And though the world did not allow us to stay together, that love remains untarnished. It is not bitterness I carry, but a profound respect for you, for what we shared, and for the timing that shaped us into who we are today. We were the right people at the wrong time. That truth will always be a quiet ache, a shadow of what might have been. But it is also a beautiful reminder that some loves are meant to be remembered, not possessed. Some stories are meant to end, not in heartbreak, but in reflection. And so I love you from afar, as I always have, quietly, without expectation, without regret. I carry you as a memory, as a lesson, and as a piece of my own soul that you helped shape. In another life, perhaps, timing will be kinder. But in this one, I will always remember us two hearts that found each other too early, and in doing so, discovered the depth of what it means to truly love. We loved at the wrong time. And that was, perhaps, the most tragic and beautiful truth of all.